I wonder if Ted can hear me now. Hi, Ted. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
Great. I can hear you, Ted. I was saying it's been a while.
Please go
Good to
ahead.
have you back on the show.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to be back. Please go ahead.
Great. So tell us about the sustainability in African trade. What's that about? Why should it concern me? What does it hold for me?
Well, the big concern, look, there's a big opportunity with sustainability in African trade, but the big concern is, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there are lots of regulations and standards being developed internationally which are going to impact Africa. And I've been working on a paper with the International Trade and Forfeiting Association because we're concerned that a lot of these regulations that are going to come out will make the trade finance gap even worse in Africa. It's already difficult for the SMEs. They're the ones who really struggle to get the finance because there's a lot of KYC, all of the, you've got to get all the right kind of documentation about yourself, collateral. But now, if you add on top of that a whole load of requirements in the ESG space, it could make it nearly impossible. So there really needs to be an African voice in this debate so that emerging markets don't get punished by an attempt to make everything much more sustainable.
Is there anything, I mean, you mentioned the SMEs, and quite frankly, they do occupy a very important place on the continent's economy. I mean, 80% of them, when you talk about trade. Is there any way, they have quite not so loud voices, is there anything they can be doing now to be part of it, to be heard and be represented in this conversation?
Well, absolutely. And what they can do that is by, all of the connections that they have with the different banks and the financiers, the different regulators as well, the institutions that they know. Because, as you said, trade, SMEs make up most of the businesses in Africa. And also most SMEs are actually owned and run by women as well. So an opportunity to get finance to the SMEs is also female empowerment as well. It's also economic diversification. And of course, everyone has a business in Africa. I literally don't know a Nigerian who doesn't always have something on the side, whatever it might be, import, export, real estate, some other kind of investment. And so this is really about genuinely reaching out to all of the real businesses in Africa, not just the big multinationals who frankly have enough access to finance.
Ted, I think you caught me there when you said you don't know a Nigerian who doesn't have a side, activity going on. But should this be driven by the private sector or should it be by the public sector?
Well, what we're talking here is about standards and regulation. And so we do want international or pan-national bodies, so pan-African bodies, for example, to come up with proper standards and regulations because it's environment. I mean, one thing is not reducing emissions, but we're also talking here about stopping deforestation, protecting biodiversity and natural ecosystems. But we're talking about the S in ESG as well, the social impacts, stamping out things like child labor, abusive working practices, or having people's livelihoods destroyed by pollution, for example. So all of those issues need to be captured, but it needs to be understood in an African context. And so the concern that we have here is that there are standards which are being developed internationally for multinational corporations, which don't understand the realities of what it's like for SMEs. And this isn't just Africa, this is all emerging markets in the world. So I think the important thing here is that there needs to be definitely standards that evolve, designed by Africans and with the agreement of Africans, and then approved at a regional level so everyone can get behind it.
Yeah, Ted, I hear you there. To be understood in an African context, I think that's really important because that's how to get the buy-in of a majority of Africans. Thank you so much, Ted George, founder with Close Advisory. Thanks a lot for your time.
My pleasure.